Well, thank you. Welcome, California, to the April 1st meeting of the Public Input Design Committee. One thing to note for this meeting, it's a different meeting than the one we held previously this morning. And so the input number to join the meeting, if you're going to call in for a public comment, has changed. So if you haven't had a chance to refresh your web page that you're viewing the meeting on, you might have the old code. So you could refresh to get the new code, but when we have Katie call for public comment, which I'm going to do right now, she will also provide you with the new code. So Katie, if you can ask for public comment, please.
Sure. Would you like to do the roll call first?
Yeah, sure. That'd be a good idea.
Okay.
Thank you. Director Hernandez, can you call the roll, please?
Sure thing. All right. Commissioner Ahmad?
Here.
Commissioner Kutagawa? Commissioner Anderson?
Here.
Commissioner Fernandez?
Here.
Commissioner Fornashari?
Here.
Commissioner Sinai?
Here.
And Commissioner Turner?
Here.
You have quorum, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, Katie, thanks.
You're welcome. Just renaming a caller. All right. In order to maximize transparency and public participation in our process, the commissioners will be taking public comment by phone. To call in, dial the telephone number provided on the live stream feed. It is 877-853-5247. When prompted, enter the meeting ID number provided on the live stream feed. It is 992-0604-8336 for this meeting. When prompted to enter a participant ID, simply press the pound key. Once you have dialed in, you will be placed in a queue. To indicate you wish to comment, please press star 9. This will raise your hand for the moderator. When it is your turn to speak, you will hear a message that says, "The host would like you to talk," and to press star 6 to speak. If you would like to give your name, please state and spell it for the record. You are not required to provide your name to give public comment. Please make sure to mute your computer or live stream audio to prevent any feedback or distortion during your call. Once you are waiting in the queue, be alert for when it is your turn to speak, and please turn down the live stream volume. And I would also like to remind again anyone in the queue, if you do wish to comment, please press star 9 to raise your hand indicating you wish to comment. We do have someone with their hand raised, and I will open their line. And the floor is yours.
Hello, Commissioners. Good afternoon. This is Renee West-Lusk. I have some questions. I don't know if you'll be answering them at this public input design meeting, but I have questions like on what the time limit on public input will be. Will it be 2 minutes each, 3 minutes each? And then I have another question having to do with what will be acceptable public comment. Are you going to give out guidelines that they need to stick with describing their community of interest, and refrain from getting into any political discussions? Or I'll give you an example of what one public hearing I went to back in 2011, where people were giving, in a certain group, were giving basically a list of complaints of their current representative. And all their testimony was just basically a complaint session, and they basically missed the point of describing their community of interest. So in my opinion, that the time people are given to give public comment is valuable The commissioners' times are valuable. Your times are limited. And I think you're going to have to give guidelines at least of what is acceptable public input and what is not. Those are my questions. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for calling in, and thank you for your input. We appreciate it. You always give us great things to think about. The two questions that you asked, are we going to answer them today? No. Are we going to answer them? Absolutely. I mean, those are two important issues that we need to work through and resolve. So as we work through this process of designing these public meetings, we will address these two issues. Thank you for bringing them forward.
Thank you.
And we have another caller. And the floor is yours.
Hello, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Rajiv Singh. I'm a Bay Area resident and an Indian American voter myself. The reason I'm speaking today to you is because I care about the representation of minority interests in our electoral process. That said, California 18, the state of Asian Americans, is that they're deeply invested. It's the 19th largest economy in the world. We drive important policies around education, healthcare, public services, and more. But the reality also is that a record number of Asian Americans in our area, especially in Silicon Valley, are running for political office. But I also think that Asian Americans do not have a chance. So therefore, to increase that chance, I'm talking in favor of redistricting in Silicon Valley. And the idea is to group communities of interest so that residents in a city or a neighborhood or residents within an ethnic group have some political representation through voting. So for example, we want to increase chances of, let's say, having an Asian American congressional representation from the minority community in the area. I also want to draw our attention to the fact that many Silicon Valley cities have switched over to district elections and more minorities are getting chances to be reelected. So I think we can do that for congressional office as well. One thing I would like to draw attention towards is to stop backing of Asian Americans in particular. California 17, for example, has 50% Asian American population, and they've had their Asian American representation since 2001. On the other hand, CA 18 has never had that privilege. So I think it is about time that we get our congressional representation. So to that end, I would urge you to consider moving cities of Cupertino and Sunnyvale and Santa Clara from CA 17 to CA 18. And I think that will make up for the loss from the rural coastline area and the potential areas from and San Mateo County as well. Now, I want to also draw your attention to the risk of not doing that, which is that we will marginalize the Asian American communities from the political process because Asian Americans are not going to get their fair share of resources. So let us also then stop cracking the rural communities by the same token. So with Palo Alto and Mountain View and Menlo Park, which are much more thriving and economically prosperous California 18 communities, we also have the polar opposite in the rural coastlines, which has its own issues like fires and debris flow, etc. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that coastline residents complain of a lack of representation as well. Now, California 20 is primarily composed of rural and semi-rural communities. So my recommendation would be to move the rural coastline cities of San Mateo and Santa Cruz counties to California 20. By the same token, let us also think about the Hispanic American citizens. I would like to draw your attention to the Voting Rights Act of
Mr. Singh,
1965.
Mr. Singh, if I can interrupt.
Sure.
We appreciate your input, and I want to say though that at this point we're talking about meeting design in this, designing our public input meetings, not about specific public input. And I mean, I don't want to stop you from providing public input at this point, but you know, we will bring your public input forward to the full commission for consideration when we are preparing to draw new districts. But I just, you know, we want to focus our input this time on or our public input on our public input design meetings. So I just wanted to see if you had some comments about specifically about the design of the meetings.
Well, to that end, I would highly recommend, and I'm aware of the restrictions we have related to COVID, but I do feel that with enough social distances and other precautionary measures, that this ought to be a conversation in person in a large sort of a hall, because there are nuances to redistricting that just have to be either drawn out or discussed in person. So that said, maybe various smaller subgroups of 4 to 5 individuals, that would be my recommendation at this point in time. I would also, given what I just said, I would also recommend that when we talk about redistricting, we cannot carry on forward without sufficient representation of Asian Americans and Hispanic community, and also representatives from our rural coastline communities in those focus groups specifically. Other than those two, I'm sure you have thought through other things, but those would be my top 2 recommendations.
Well, we appreciate your input and your thought, and we will bring what you brought forward to us to the entire group. We're capturing that, and I want to ensure you. And I also want to encourage you to continue to participate in the process and provide your public input either through our online COI tool, or encourage you to participate in one of our public input meetings that we're developing and will be scheduling over the next several months.
I sure will, Commissioner. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your input.
And that was it at this time, Chair.
Okay. With that, we'll turn it over to general announcements to see if any of the commissioners or staff have any announcements they would like to add or provide. Patricia?
I just want to let everyone know I am taking notes like I did last time and I'm not capturing the COI information, but I just put that we got some input so that staff can grab that when it's needed. But as questions come up, as I said at our general meeting, we are writing them down so we don't lose them.
Okay. Well, thank you. If there are no other comments at this time, let's see. Patricia and I purposefully kept this the design of this meeting fairly short because we didn't know where the business meeting was going to wind up. But we thought it was important to focus and understand what the requirements are that we have for public meetings. And so, you know, we've got 4 items to talk through. Once we talk through those 4 items, we've got a proposed path forward. It's changed slightly from the document that we posted, but we'll talk through that. And again, you know, we really want this to be an interactive meeting with you know, capture your thoughts, your input, the staff's thoughts, staff's input, so to enable us to come up with the best public input meeting design that we possibly can. So with that, if there are no other comments, we'll talk about the legal parameters. I appreciate that these items didn't all get posted very far ahead of time. So what I thought we could do is give everyone a few minutes, if you haven't had a chance, to read through the document that I put up, and then jot down your questions, your thoughts, your concerns, and then we can have a discussion. So how about we take a few minutes to take a look at that document. So it looks, it's kind of hard to tell if you're looking at your screen or you're reading from your screen. I'm going to guess, does anyone need a little bit more time? Are you okay, Jane? Or are you still reading? Can't hear you.
Go ahead. I'm marking up things.
Okay. All right. Very good. So let's see. So what I try to do here is capture the legal requirements, the statutory requirements that the commission has for public input. Of course, we have to follow the Bagley-Keene requirements. Marion has developed a handout for that is going to be presented at an upcoming meeting for us. I didn't think compliance Bagley-Keene in this context was as critical to our specific design here, although it is critical, but as the government code part. So of course we had the 14-day public notice requirement, but as far as the requirements for public input, they're highlighted. It's really highlighted in yellow in that sentence, and that's as specific as it gets. Provide public shall include hearings to receive public input before the commission draws any maps, and hearings following the drawing and display of commission maps. And then in addition, hearings shall be supplemented with other activities as appropriate to further increase opportunities for the public to observe and participate in the review process. So I guess I'll start. I have a couple questions for Marion. Other activities is kind of vague. Is there any expectation there?
Well, I think you're already doing it. The COI tool is certainly one of the avenues. Other ways of inviting public comment, input. But really, the sky's the limit. Whatever you all think is appropriate, you can do.
Okay. And then the other question I have for you is with regard to public comment period. After we draw or post the first set of preliminary maps, there's a 14-day requirement where we cannot post any new maps. But then the statute says that public comment shall be taken for at least 7 days from the date of public display of any subsequent preliminary maps, and for at least 3 days from the date of public display of any final statewide maps. So I guess there's two questions there. So for subsequent preliminary maps, is this 7-day posting requirement, but it doesn't say we can't continue to work on maps after that.
Correct.
Do we have to wait 7 days from our last preliminary map before we post the final map?
No, but I think it's advisable. I mean, the whole point of allowing the time limit is so that if there are public members who think that there's some change, that they can have time to make that comment to the commission and give the commission time to act on it before it does its next set of maps. So although it's not legally required, I think that as a matter of policy, if you want to get public input to make any corrections that you want in your maps, it's good to allow the time to do that.
Okay, and then I see you, Jane. I'll get right to you. What's the 3 days after the final maps?
You know, it's one of the problems of having done things drawn by initiative. I think that if there were some glaring error that came to light during that 3-day period, the commission could still modify in its final, before it finally approves the maps. And that's what the 2010 commission did, was allow that time period. Hopefully, there are not going to be any of those major corrections, but it is a fail-safe valve to get other eyes on it and make sure that there is an opportunity to make any necessary corrections. I mean, it's better to take, if there is some mistake, it's better to correct it before you finally approve the maps.
Okay, Jane.
Yeah, basically, you're right. Essentially those 14 days, those 7 days, those 3 days, we can't touch the maps. We can propose, things that we can kind of think about, da 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 da. We can put nothing out during that time frame. Basically, and the idea is so all the public can be looking at the same map, because what you can imagine what can happen is, oh, I see this and I want to comment, I don't like the line through District 12, blah blah. Well, but by the time their comment gets in, it's already been moved. So it's to freeze it for 14 days, and we can only take comments, da, 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 and only then can we really, and we can think about stuff, but we're not supposed to be doing anything.
So we can go on vacation that 14 days.
Yeah. I'm thinking if we could put those days.
I'm just trying to figure out when vacation's coming up.
I'm
No
thinking in
vacation.
terms of holiday, if we can work that out, Thanksgiving. But also,
And just one correction, Commissioner Anderson, I think that aside from the first set of draft maps where you cannot do any maps during that time period, I think it's possible for the commission to make corrections during the subsequent public review periods, although it's better not to. But the law doesn't specifically apply.
I don't have the actual wording here, but going through it, that was exactly, how it's been described is, no, that's another freeze period.
You do have the exact wording, Jane.
It's right.
I copied it right out of the legal webpage.
So what I'm hearing is that maybe it makes sense for all of us just to come into a consensus about what we want to present as how we're how we want to interpret it for 2021.
And I'm not sure that you can do it at this far ahead of time, because, for instance, if you come up with what you consider your final maps in the 3 days, and on the first day after they're published, someone comes to you and say, wait a minute, you've forgotten such and such, and it's really essential, you don't want to have to wait until the third day to make that correction if you agree that it's a necessary correction. So particularly during the last time period, I think that if errors are called to your attention, the sooner you make those corrections, the better it is for the public to know that those corrections have been made.
And Jane?
Or can I say, it's like a protest period. You can collect all protests during that time, but you need to leave that little window to then make them all, because that's how in talking to the line drawers and stuff. Now, although they'll never say, because they'll go with legal, but that's how it's always been interpreted about that little protest period. And that's essentially what it is. Now, do we want to have an idea of exactly what we want to do, and maybe make the corrections and do all the numbers? But we should leave that, so then there's that one last day. So they're final until approved, it's just like our contract for the line drawer. Boom, it's all signed, and then you have to wait those days to make sure there's no protest, and only then do you then proceed to the next state.
Well, the problem is that, especially for the final approval, if you wait until 3 days before the final date to make your final maps,
don't do that.
Don't do that, because if you have to make a correction, you've got to have time to have those corrections posted and have the public review them, and to get your final submission to the Secretary of State's office ready, all to be submitted by that last day.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, in reality, if we have to make changes at the last minute, there's no 3 days left.
Right.
So, I mean, so this is, I think, Trina.
Yeah. So it seems that we're looking at receiving input different than actual corrections that may need to be made. And I think that it would be really good as if we can differentiate that when we're building out the timeline. Mm-hmm. And I'm still wanting to see a date or a buffer or something. What is the date that we stop receiving public comment before we start to draw a line on any of these? Because if we keep receiving public comment as maps are being drawn, we either at some point will receive them and ignore them, or we will continuously shift and change, or just so happenly they came in and it's more of the same. We already knew that. We don't need to do, but it's almost like we're betting on comments coming in that won't change anything, or we need to put a stop to public comments that will actually allow us to draw the districts and then be able to present them, which then we can fall into the 14, all of the time period, the 14, the 7, and the 3. But it seems like there needs to be something ahead of these dates that will allow us to present them whole. And I don't see that on the charts.
Right, and so this is just the legal requirements. I took them directly from the state, the state
Statutes.
website. And
right, I
so,
shouldn't have said, Neil, I shouldn't have said I don't see them on the charts. I'm sorry, I know you did, and I appreciate seeing them there. Some just meant for our conversation.
Right. And so I think, I mean, where we're kind of heading, where we're trying to kind of head is sort of, and I agree 100%, Trina, we need to have that, figure that out. But we're going to talk about the schedule in a little bit, and we're going to talk about the line drawer contract and the requirements in the contract. And I think when we get all that information together, then we can kind of begin to look at, okay, based on the notional timeline that we have right now, okay, this is about the time we think, we need to stop receiving COI input, and then when, as we're drawing maps, we're still going to receive input on the maps and feedback, I will say, on the maps, and as we go through the process. But yeah, I think we need a hard stop on when we stop collecting COI input. But I see Jane has something she wants to share. You muted yourself.
I'm sorry, I didn't. In an idea, rather than saying we stop taking input, say the draft will be as of input received of this date, because the input's going to keep on coming in. It doesn't matter if we say, okay, we'll stop. It doesn't matter. So it's like, say, we're working on the draft. We're drafting at this point, and it includes information that we've received as of this date, because then, there will be a second draft. There will be. And some of it, but as Trina was saying, some of it, or Commissioner Turner was saying, there'll be some of the information will come in, and we already have that and multiple times, and some of it will be new, and so it sort of depends. Would it change anything that we've done? We won't know until we're in that sitting the 14 days. And at that point, I think we go back and catch whatever else came in, evaluate. It's going to be a continual, and up until a certain point at the end, you're right, say, look, if it isn't in by this date, it doesn't get in. But that wouldn't be till the very final, as I see it, because otherwise it is a rolling thing. But you just say this map is of information received of that date, because I don't see how you can stop input.
Well, we can. Okay. Well, Patricia?
Yeah, I think one of the things we want to do today, and I know this is tough because we all want to roll up our sleeves and actually figure it all out, but what Neil and I wanted to make sure was that we were all on the same page on what are the parameters, what are the constraints, what do we have to work with, so that we don't go back and say, wait, what did it say? How much money did we have? So what we're hoping to get out of today is all the questions that popped up when you read this. And I know we've all read it several times. And I think the same question pops up every time for me, is what is an open public hearing? What is meant by open public hearing? And just get the legal clarifications, but then also maybe reach consensus on how we're going to define it. And that's a draft, right, of what we bring to the whole commission. But I'd like us to step back from thinking we know, remember the whole we know how the process works, to really wait until we're with the line drawers and we can have some of those conversations, and really be open to what may be different from 2011 than it 20, we can't say this is how it was always done because it's only been done once. And so we need to let go of saying this is how it's always been done. We're the second experiment in this. So let us allow ourselves to think that way versus we've got a whole, it's already been created for us in the past. So Neil, my question is to Marion, what is an open hearing process mean?
I think what it means is compliance with Bagley-Keene. And that means that everything has to be made public, either in open session or being posted so that it's open to the public. It goes back to you don't take public input in a private meeting. It really is so the public can not only present testimony, but it can hear your response to that testimony and can see what you do with it when you're drawing your maps, so that when you're talking about whether a line should go here or you should go there, the discussion of, well, we heard from so-and-so who said this and so said that, which way do we want to go? All those types of discussions are also done in open session.
Let me ask a question on testament, because I think where I'm kind of confused is last time there was a lot of testimony, and a lot of it was people came and to quote unquote hearings, very, very everybody up at the front, the commissioners in the front, very traditional way of doing hearings. We have a tool now, and the more we can get people to use the tool, I think the hearings may look, when we do have public sessions, I'm going to call them public sessions for right now, but or I'll call them hearings, but the hearings may not be with as much with testimonies versus maybe just showing what we've received. So I'm just trying to figure out what we have to do and what was done, because I think there's going to be different phases here.
You're right, and you've got a whole mechanism available this time which wasn't available last time. But part of every Bagley-Keene meeting is the opportunity for public comment. You've only had, maybe 5 people at a time give public comment. But if you had a meeting where there were 100 people wanting to give public comment, you could place time limits on those people, but you have an obligation to hear from each of those persons who want to present public comment. So I think you can try and discourage it and try to encourage people to use the COI tool and submit it that way. But if you actually hold either a virtual or an actual public meeting and you get 100 people that show up, I think you do have to take comments from all of them.
That makes sense. And you said for open hearing process, and you just used it again, you said, I think that complies with, to make sure that complies with Bagley-Keene. So if we were to ask another legal counsel, would they say something different? Or what when you say I think, what does that infer, or what does that mean?
I think I'm trying to figure out what happens when COVID ends, if it ends, and the governor's executive orders are lifted. That will change the nature of your public hearings. For now, you can do it virtually and allow people to appear virtually. That would not be true if the COVID restrictions are lifted.
So I thought, we can't be virtual, but the public can't as well?
You have to provide a location where the public can appear. You may also allow them to be virtual, but if they want to come to your meeting and testify in person, you have to allow them.
And testimony just means any public comment.
Correct.
Okay, sorry guys, I just need that.
Well, just to be clear, it doesn't say testimony, it says input.
But part of Bagley-Keene is you allow public comment, and the public comment, if it might be about something else, but it could also be input.
Right, but if you look at on the document, where number 7 is, the first line, it says the commission shall establish and implement a open hearing process for public input.
Right, but it also says the commission shall apply with Bagley-Keene in the first section. So you have to satisfy both.
No, I was nitpicking between the term testimony and input.
Yeah,
it doesn't say testimony, it says input. And so I think that can be interpreted more broadly, is my
it
take.
can be interpreted broadly, and you can encourage people to try and do it with the COI tool, and that is certainly public input. But if they want to do it by public comment, I don't think you can preclude that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I don't think we're thinking we don't want to hear from the public. We just want to be innovative in how we do it.
Sure, and the meetings last time, they went on for hours and hours into the early morning hours, and it was hard for the public and hard for the commissioners.
Okay. Jane had a comment, and then Trina.
Yeah, just a quick on that. You know, there are a lot of things that we know that we don't want to do, like from last time, including that. And we want to get back to our main point. This is just a quick, in that big document I sent you, which is all sort of marked up from the line presentation plan, they have many different ideas in there dealing with this and the bad things that happened in those meetings last time. And one of which is appointments. You know, you don't never want people standing in line, 100 people, and a bunch of different ideas like that, which we can think about later. But, and you're right, I think we need to, I like the idea of defining these little terms because they're all required in terms of what we finally come up with. So, but there are many, many ways to go around this. I totally agree. You don't have to do it like they did last time. And I don't think we want to do it. And I don't think they, from 2010, they don't want us to do it that way either, because there are a lot of problems there.
And you can certainly work out an appointment system if people want to participate in that, but still under Bagley-Keene, you're required to have an open comment section. So if someone shows up that doesn't have an appointment, they still have to be allowed to testify.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. Trina?
And actually, I was just going to bring up the appointment system that Andrew just spoke about in our earlier presentation. So nothing different.
Did anything else jump out at people as they read this that they would want, just to make sure that we have clarification, we're all on the same page? Marcy?
It was just a follow-up to something Marion said. If the COVID restrictions change and we move to in-person, commissioners could still be online, but having an accessible place for if people are coming to give public comment, can they only give public comment in person, or they can also give public comment online as well?
That's up to the commission. You're required to
Okay.
have a public location, and any place where a commissioner is a public location, but the commission could also allow it remotely.
Okay.
I mean, so conceivably, you know, we could have a location in Northern California and Southern California and have commissioners in each of those locations and people commenting. For example, I'm not trying to design the way we're doing this, but I just want to make sure that that's okay.
Yes.
Okay.
You can have as many remote locations as you want, provided there's a commissioner at each one and they're all accessible.
And
Okay.
that is in the plan. And again, pretty much everything they said today is in that plan, and it's highlighted.
Okay. So we're going to
That's
post
not
that.
the plan. That was their recommend. I just want to be clear and not call it the plan. That was their ideas and stuff. We are creating the plan, and they were very clear on that today, that they are the implementers and we will work together. And there are some things we need to do, but a plan has not been created. And that's why we've all been invited to work together here.
Yeah, that was their proposed plan, because we asked them to propose a plan. Now we create it.
And we'll review that document for the next meeting on the 14th, and that'll be part of the conversation with the line drawers. And we'll invite our videographer to join us and just see what we can do about coming to a good place. So we haven't heard from Alicia, Isra, or Linda. I didn't know. I just wanted to give you the space to comment if you wish. Not trying to put you on the spot. No? Okay. Okay. So Patricia, are there, I mean, Did we capture what we needed to capture on this document so far, or am I missing?
I think so. Um, yeah, I think we've got a little bit of clarity. I know that I keep asking the same questions, what's an open hearing and all that, because I just want to make sure it is as open as Marion says. I keep, I think we're fine. I think we're ready to go to the next one.
Okay, we'll get that memo from Marion when it's released, and to everybody, so we all understand what the Bagley-Keene requirements are. Alvaro?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that the only thing that I don't see here, and this is going to be kind of a moving target, is the COVID protocols. That's something that as we roll out and possibly start doing
Okay.
the physical ones in person, we need to adhere to those specific protocols that we're required to as a state agency, and the CDC requirements, all that stuff. So I know that's a moving target because it's right now it's everything's shut down, but as it starts to open up, we have to consider all those other implications.
Yeah, great, excellent point. Certainly in the back of my mind, but it should have been something that we had already captured, and we appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you. Marion?
The other thing I think you need to just consider is how many draft maps you want to have. By law, you're only required to have one. I think that from what you all were saying, you want to at least have a second one before you do your final. So you need to sort of work backwards from whenever your final deadline is to work in enough time that you can go through the process of redrawing the lines as many times as you think it's going to be necessary. And you may not know that until after you do your first draft and see what kind of a reaction it gets. I mean, basically last time the commission had to totally throw out, I think as Karin explained, it was done before there was a whole lot of public input. So you all would not be in that same position, and hopefully your first draft will be in much better shape.
Yeah, Trina?
And I'm wondering if in the draft maps, Marion, is it an option to present multiple draft maps at the same time? Or maybe not multiple, but a couple at the same time if you're leaning, kind of vacillating between a couple? What would that look like?
Yeah, I probably wouldn't call them draft maps. They used to call them iterations. I don't know exactly what the meaning of that word is. But if, for instance, if you were trying to decide between coastline versus mountains or how you're going to draw a line, you could present two alternatives and ask for public input on which is preferable.
Thank you.
Okay, it's interesting. Something to think about. Okay, then I think at this point we'll go to the line drawing contract parameters. Jane put together those parameters from the contract for us, so I'll turn it over to her to talk to that document.
Thank you. This is looks nice and simple and tiny and organized. It's actually a lot of different information all put together. There are items from the RFP. There are items from the proposal that our contractors gave us, and then there are items from the actual contract. Okay, remember now, as I try to make all disclaimers. Look, this is only what a line drawer is involved in. So when it says public input meetings, that doesn't mean all of our input meetings. That's only ones that the line drawer is also going to attend. And commission meetings, these are also just the ones that are considered with line drawing. Now, are there other meetings that they're going to attend and required to attend, and are those included in the contract? That's another issue. But for our purposes, that's what this is. And these numbers of meetings and stuff were all put together basically assuming that we're going to do stuff on 2010's method.
Hey, Jane, I'm going to share my screen real quick.
Yes, please
do. There was
a
suggestion so that the public can see what we're talking about.
Yes, yeah, please do that, Commissioner Portorio O'Neill. Yeah, because so this is just sort of general. So if you could put that up there.
You see that?
Yes. Yeah. Actually, kind of like, yeah, there you go. Make it, yeah, perfect. Well, actually back off just a hair. There you go. Perfect. Um, so these numbers went out there, and then Commissioner Sadwani and myself went, wait a sec. It can't really work like that. But we're already further down the line, so we made some modifications, not that many. And these do not consider any kind of the extended timeline. These were kind of originally based. Remember, back when this whole went out, there was still a possibility that July 31st was a date, getting it before July 31st. So that's kind of what it had in mind. And then basically the contract itself includes, there's a scope of work for all the work for the contractor. And that includes these base numbers, essentially of meetings, optional meetings, thinking, well, we'll probably want those as well. Essentially, like the base is a minimum. We're going to have those, or they're going to get essentially paid for those. Base hits we're going to have. The optional is we're pretty sure they're going to have. And then we also have the cost for if we want more above those. And so we have the funding all organized so we can charge for it. What is included in our line item on our budget, for the line drawers, it includes essentially the total number here. It does not include the cost for if we want to do extras above that. So with that bit of information, we say that, okay, the public input meetings, and this is considered both before we've done, i.e. collecting COI and line drawing. I.e. getting the public's input after drafts have gone out, right? So, and the 40 hours, and this idea of the pre-draft maps, that includes COI and getting public input before we do a draft, and then the post-draft are collecting all the input afterwards. These numbers of 30 and 10, those are strictly based on an idea. That's just kind of an idea to help the line drawer put together their budget and their bidding. We can decide exactly how we want to do that, and there are lines in the proposed plan of Haystack and Q2 that talk about how they kind of think those should be possibly rearranged. But so that's an item to consider. Then the commission meetings, these are actual line drawing meetings. The idea being a bit more like the business meetings that they talked about from 2010, where it's all in public view, but it's more like kind of what our meetings are right now. The public can view it all, but we're not getting their input as we're drawing. And so these were kind of the idea that was tossed out for, again, just looking at a budget. Draft maps being about 20 of those, and the final maps 5. Will have to change somewhat. And then the technical consultation hours, this is more for just because we're talking about budgets as well. Knowing that they're definitely going to do at least 60 of them, probably about 100. And those are for working with the data management group, coming up with that, how, what is your delineation, doing the coding involved in merging that over, putting again, for public input so the public can see the maps, helping figure out how to code and make, like on a little map, like pins, we were talking about where the COIs are. That's what those kind of consultation hours are considering. And like Commissioner Sinai said, the proposal that I had sent before, and we will be continue to talk about, that that Haystack and Q2 did, is considered their proposed plan, but we now have to work out the details of what is our plan. And then the actual total scope of work of the line drawers will be determined. So that's kind of putting all that together. And now if we decide, oh, we need to do something different or above and beyond that, or wait, there's a whole other task, that would require an addendum to the contract. And usually more money is required. Not necessarily, it could be just like different tasks, but usually more money is required. So that's in a real summary, quick summary, what's in just for meeting wise for the line drawing contract.
I'm just curious.
Tricia?
I'm just curious, when it says costs per, well, first, when we invite the line drawers to work with us, with this, is that coming out of the technical consultation hours, or is there just a whole nother budget for that?
That's a good question.
Okay.
Yeah, and yeah.
I'm guessing that means we don't know.
that is part of the scope of work to be determined with the contract, with the,
just because I'm like, oh well, yeah, those are precious hours. And then the second, when it says $300 per hour, is that per person or for the team?
I'd have to actually have a further look at some of the details of the actual budget and how it got changed. That was some of the information that DHS wanted from the line drawers, and I don't have an actual final copy of that. So I can't tell you if it's the whole team or if that's, I can't tell you more on the breakdown of that.
You can tell I'm a consultant, so I'm being very careful on how we use their time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But,
and that's
also,
go ahead.
Jane, up at the top, the $6,000 that we have, that it would be for Haystack. That would be for the entire group. That's not broken out by person. And I think I heard in their presentation that they would have more than one person that would show up in these spaces.
Yes.
So, okay. So I'm hopeful this part down here is for the firm and not for per person.
Yeah, I don't quite know, Commissioner Turner, and I can find out, but the idea of bringing all this forward is we're looking at constrictions. And so what we want to be efficient with is why I kind of one consideration how I put this together. But again, any questions, because I took lots of information and I happened to eventually boil it down to this. I could have done it many, many different ways, and there are sheets and sheets of that I did and changed it. So please ask questions if, there are many ways to talk about this same information. So,
Trina.
Yeah. I don't know. I think I'm just a little bit leaning towards Commissioner Sinai talked about the caution in the plan, and I know we've addressed it a couple of different ways, and I'm wondering if the wording on here can just be, these are options, right? As we put together the plan. And so each time it's said, I'm hearing from a lot of council that said, and actually our requirement to ensure that we're making plans, we're making the determination. So I think maybe even just in options that they're presenting to us, so that it's clear that the plan is being developed by the commission.
So if I can comment on, maybe I can take a stab at that. When this RFP was being developed, there was a lot of conversation about how to design this RFP in kind of the state of uncertainty we were in with regard to COVID and how we wanted to handle the meetings. But it was, there's a requirement that we have a way to compare apples to apples. And so and that's kind of the reason it's laid out this way: 30 meeting, 30 post, or 30 pre, 10 post, 10 optional. What are those going to cost, so we can compare costs? But I think Jane, based on what you were saying, if I can kind of infer a little bit, is that there's flexibility. We're not constrained to these numbers. It's just we have some flexibility to sort of redesign how we do this ultimately. I mean, maybe I'll even jump to as far as say, we have a contract based on this much money and we can design how we do the meetings. Can we go that far?
Yeah. Basically, the you're right. Remember, originally, all RFPs have to be, it's they're bottom dollar based. This is not. This was an RFP two because of qualifications. Because absolutely right. There's unusual things with COVID, how you can approach things, and so we wanted to know more ideas, a variety of information. So, but you have to have something that is apples to apples. That
To
is
compare to begin with, but
correct.
now that we have the contract in place, we have more flexibility in how we design the
Oh.
use of the money in that contract.
Yes, except that basically they're like the base number. Those are, we're going to need that many public input meetings, and considering these are actually possibly low. We'll need more. The breakdown, how we want to arrange it. Do we want to put them all before, after? We have some control over. The numbers of after and in the actual line drawing process, those we don't have that much control over, because there's certain amounts that we have to do 75 maps, and we might have to do them twice, maybe a couple of them 3 times, maybe not. And it takes a certain amount of time to do that. And we don't know enough to say, this is how we're going to do it without input from the line drawer. But the 30-10 breakdown, the 25 breakdown, those were just kind of thrown out there. We have total control over that. And if we only want to do 40 and 25, okay. If we want to do more, that's okay. And we can do however many we want. These are essentially minimums. And what's already is included in our budget item, like a total of 50 public input meetings, a total of 35 commission meetings. And then we have money in terms of, okay, we need 56. We need, but we need 32 of those. But we need more. Can we have some of those meetings do something else? We can absolutely control that.
Right, but there's also an underlying assumption in these budget numbers that they designed the cost of these meetings based on an assumption of what the meeting was going to be and how the meeting was going to be designed. And I think, so that's what we're working on right now, is exactly what do these meetings look like and how are they going to be designed? And we'll be working closely with the line drawers to figure that out. But I think that, we have to consider all that as we're working on our design process. But I think we have to consider that we have flexibility here, right? We're not locked in absolutely on these numbers. We're more concerned about the bottom line than these individual numbers of meetings.
Sort of one thing I want to say is that the meetings were based on the public input meetings. They are considering, and they are considering that they might have to go out into the public, and this is the meeting costs. In addition to this are travel, all that sort of stuff, and that's broken down separately. So and that's included in our bottom line dollar, an assumption of those. But if it's all remote, those things, so a certain amount of those go away, certain amount they still do, because they might have go out in the they might have line drawer people in other areas remotely. So a certain amount is included in it, but it isn't like every single one of these considers everybody out in the field all the time. It's sort of a mix of that. So that helps a bit more with the flexibility in terms of the numbers. I think I did not put that in, so sorry about that.
Okay, thanks, Patricia. You're muted.
Do we still want to share the screen, or?
Oh, okay, I can stop that.
I think the one piece that's still missing for me is, what is the overall contract? I know we saw the number, but the overall budget? Was it 1 point something?
1.6, I want to say. I was putting my hand on that right now. That's the contract. No, did I print out the contract? Here's the RFP. I could get that for us in a bit.
Yeah.
I don't have it right now in front of me. It is broken down where essentially here's the base number, here's the optional number, then the bottom line. And I think it's something like, I don't know, like 1.1 and then 1.6, something like that. And then it has, extras. Do you want me to look, do you want me to actually get the numbers and report back, or is that kind of ballpark enough?
Ballpark's good for now. Anyone else have any questions? Sorry, Neil.
No, it's fine. Okay.
Next.
Okay. Next, what's next?
Oh, I'm sorry. Before we go, one last thing is the one big problem here with and how I put it together is this is based on what's in the contract. However, it doesn't divide things the way we've been thinking about it, like pre-census, post-census. Notice this is about pre-draft and post-draft maps, but the draft maps occur after the census data. So we can't just go, oh, these meetings, they directly relate to those meetings, like the public input COI, but they don't. And so I came up with multiple ideas of how to break it down that way. And it got really messy and it was too confusing. So, but I do want to make sure that people know that it's not the same. The category breakdowns are not the same. So.
Okay. Thanks, Jane. Appreciate you putting that together for us. So we want to talk about the budget, and I'll share this document.
Neil?
Yeah.
Yeah, right before we go to budget, I guess, and Jane, when you come back, I think the question was already asked. I just want to be really clear. For example, Jisia invited our line drawers to these sessions, which is great, and I'm hopeful that they'll come. And I think we've talked before about line drawing, joining in on some of the sessions to just get a feel and to see kind of some of the things we're hearing, which in my mind, all of would have been outside of the way that you've delineated the meetings post-draft, pre-draft, et cetera. And so it's almost information gathering, and so wanting to know where those sessions fall and hoping that they're not counting as some of the ones for the post and pre-draft where they're actually doing some of that work, or if we can get a different kind of idea of how many of those meetings are they willing to participate in, or if it's just assumed they'll be there just because they're part of the team now.
Can I go ahead and answer that one? That is the stuff that Sarah and I are still, in the onboarding stage with the line drawers, and we are actually trying to work out the elements that we know are required in the scope of work, and how it actually fits exactly with the breakdown, so we understand it, so then we can hand all that over and come up kind of with an idea that then we can bring to the commission, full commission, and also with the finance and admin group, we kind of handed that off to. So I don't have the answer yet for that, and that is certainly one of the questions we'll be delving into Monday.
And because one last thing, so even as Isra and I meet with data management, and we were anxious to meet with line drawers as well, and then introduce them to the I forgot their name, USDR. So again, how are we counting that time and what? So same answer and your same response, I'm sure, but those piece parts we want to also think through.
Yeah, actually, those are delineated in, those have particular items in the scope of work. And so we're actually going to walk through that. Those are some indeed of the technical hours, because they didn't know what was going to be involved, and how that, what is our line drawer role, what is statewide database role, and what is data management role. And so how those fit together, and then how it all gets built out, we need to have a meeting with essentially it's going to be a crossover meeting to kind of get a ballpark to then bring that to the commission. And but those are some of the technical hours. There are several different items, and including like I mentioned about the map for the showing the public information on mapping. That's something that the statewide database will be doing because it's involved in the COI tool, but how that crosses over to the line drawing and them gathering that information is then when it becomes Haystack Q2. So we're trying to get that kind of clear before we even proceed into, okay, now how does the commission ultimately want to do it? Just pathways forward. So you'll be hearing the data management group will be hearing very soon. This public input meeting, data management meeting are like the 1-2 for the line drawers.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, Jane, I mean, if you could, yes, you're following up on that, obviously, but the first question that Trina had about, what bucket does them joining us in our meetings, you think you can kind of come up with that and report back on the 14th for us?
Oh, I'll see. That's why I kind of want to have a meeting on the 6th. That information is going to go out basically as soon as.
Okay. Well,
yes, absolutely. By the 14th, sure.
Right, but we've canceled the meeting on the 6th, but we'll meet on the 14th, and we'll circle back to that. Very good.
And part of the reason that it's important is like the 14th, we have different pieces. And so it would be good for them to hear all of it. But if they're going to charge us per hour, then we will, maybe it's not, it does affect how we think about using them.
Absolutely. It's just like when we realized how our video photographer meetings were working. It's crucial information. So, and I'll get it as soon as I possibly can.
Thank you. Okay. Anything else? Alicia.
I already know the answer, but I just want to make sure the public knows that when we're talking about meetings, we're talking about days versus, right now our business meetings are 2 or 3 days. So I want to make sure that everyone understands it's like our 2-day meeting would be considered 2 days for the line drawer. So I just want to make sure that when we're talking about meetings, it's not group of meetings, it's a specific day. Right? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's Jane.
That also, thank you, Commissioner Fernandez, for bringing that up. There's also a very important point. When it says 14 days and 7 days and 3 days, these waiting periods, these are not business days. These are calendar days, which makes a huge difference. And that's not actually necessarily true when it comes to contracting. So the protest periods, those have to be business days. So it is different, but for our perspective, these are calendar days. And also it's calendar days from beyond July 31st that we add to December 15. Those are calendar days. So if the date is August 15, the maps are due December 30th. There are a few differences there. And then actually, if
we'll talk about that.
Yeah. But it is calendar day.
In the schedule.
Calendar
right.
day.
Yeah. I'll just tell you the schedule's not correct that I put, but it's notional. It's draft and it's notional, just for conversational purposes. Okay, so I just, as far as budget goes, I just want to share with you all kind of the details of how we got to the bottom line budget for meetings. The bottom line budget.
One quick question.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Alvaro, when do we need to stop for the official break? Is
In
it
12
3:30?
minutes.
3:30.
Do we want to take public comments before we go break and then do budget?
Oh, do we want to take public? I was going to wait to the end and take public comment, but is that okay? Yeah, I was just going to do it at the end. The meeting's so short. Okay. Okay. So I think, so anyway, I just, again, for planning purposes, we had to come up with some strawman proposal of what these meetings might look like. In order to come to a bottom line budget, the bottom line budget for meetings that we put in the budget was about $350K. And this sheet just shows you kind of what our thinking was. And it's certainly not etched in stone at all. It's just what our thinking was. So I will share that. So can y'all see this? Does that help? Okay. So it was based on this notion that we would have 29 pre-census public input meetings. The most recent iteration of that conversation was 15 virtual and 14 live. So you can see the first two boxes break it up that way. So the virtual public input meetings, again, the vision was there would be 3 remote locations where people could come and give testimony to the commission. We'd all be virtual, but there would be a location. There would be 3 locations where people could come in and provide public input, and we would rotate between those locations. And so, given that model or idea of how to do it, the cost estimate was about $7,000 per day for those meetings. Then the live meetings, where we would be at a location, were about $5K per meeting. So the entire commission would be together in a location, be similar to kind of last time. Then for budgeting purposes, the thought would be there'd be 4 large group meetings. We talked about whether we wanted to do that or not last time, and we'll continue that conversation. I don't think we've gotten to the bottom of it, but for planning purposes, the assumption was there would be 4 of those, and they're about $5K each. And then there would be post-census public input. They're called public input, but I would phrase them as feedback on our maps. Those would be about, am I adding that up? 11K. Huh, that seems odd. Why is it so much more? I guess I should have looked this through in a little more detail.
It's the video.
It's the video.
I think I was going to ask, is the video missing on option 2 and 3?
Looks like it.
And so then that cost would go up by $4,500 for each one.
Yeah.
Which I should have caught earlier, so I apologize.
Yep, my mistake here. Wow. Yeah.
I was trying to figure out how it was so much cheaper to go live than it was to be virtual with all of us traveling.
Right. Okay, so this is not that helpful. My apologies. Bottom line is we got about $350K that we budgeted for meetings. And this is about what it would cost if we did meetings like this. And I'll fix that up and reset it out. But the intent wasn't to constrain us on what we want our meetings to look like. Just give us some idea about the costs associated with each meetings or each approach, and we could piece these different pieces together to understand what the meetings might cost us. Trina?
Thank you. I was thinking about, I think Marion's message, which I kind of knew that, Marion, but it still was ringing in the back of my mind about some of the meetings going on till the middle of the night, or a long meeting. She didn't say middle of the night. So the off-duty officer charge you have there for 6 hours seems like where we will also have potentially additional costs if once we go virtual, right?
Right, once we go live,
Thank you. Once we go live.
We'll have to have security at the venues. And we'll work through, and that's one of the things that Derek and I were going to work through. But, until we know what the meetings look like, we don't know.
Just sounds like 6 hours is probably wishful thinking.
Yeah, it's not.
Just to reiterate what Marion had mentioned is that this go around, we have many more tools for people to provide public input. So we may not have the same number of people attending these events because they can provide public input in different ways. But I do think that, the venue, depending on which venue it is, there may be very hard stop timeframes that we have to be aware of. But definitely the officer, the off-duty security would be a consideration that could increase that cost, as well as the other ones, like, for example, the language, some of those things, because it goes beyond a certain time frame, may incur additional costs as well.
Patricia.
Just a thought. I was just gonna write it in the questions, but then I realized it's not fair because I didn't put it publicly. But just something to think about later is we're going to need, because people are inputting, giving us their input in different ways. We are going to need to figure out how we let people know we heard them when they inputted it digitally or by mail or whatever, so that they don't feel like they have to speak up again. So I just wanted to put that. So the question is, how do we assure that people feel heard when they submit community of interest information outside of the meetings?
Linda.
Can you help me understand where you got the two languages? Is that meant to be a hard and fast rule? I think I'm asking mainly because I think we're still grappling with some of what exactly that's all going to be.
Right, and we're still grappling with it. I'll let Alvaro comment on that.
Yeah, so we wanted to make sure that we had it available should we need it. It's not to say that that's exactly what we're going to need. There hasn't been a request. We're still waiting on that. There may be additional. So we'll have to evaluate on a case-by-case basis. But that is for us, for budgeting purposes. We wanted to make sure that there was something there in case we did need them, at least with the two languages.
Linda?
So for clarification, when you were budgeting, was that for what we've been doing, is that just for interpretation for public comment only? I know that we're also talking about other variations to try to accommodate, various, people with various language needs, but at the same time, trying to balance it with the, with the fiscal costs too.
That is correct. We tried to incorporate it with any of the outreach activities and also public input part of it, should we need the funds, because it's very hard to ask for additional funds.
Yeah.
For these meetings, though, in this case, for these meetings, this is for interpretation for these meetings.
Well, actually, not interpretation. It's a clarification. Well, no, you're right. Interpretation. I'm sorry, not translation.
So is it okay. Yeah, interpretation. So is that was your intent on in at least putting that placeholder in there just for the public comment, or were you thinking it still seems a little low? That's why.
Well, it wasn't for interpretation of the entire meeting. These meetings are for public input,
public
so there
input.
would be more public input time allocated for interpreters to be available because there wasn't so much of a commission meeting per se. So that's why you see those amounts. Now, again, depends on how long the public input goes, how long they're needed. There's a couple of different things that we've talked about, and as we develop this design, talking about blocks of time set aside for specific languages. I know that's something that the language access has talked about. So there's a lot of variables going into that, but we have these as placeholders, like you said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alicia?
Actually, Alvaro just nailed it because I did want to specify that as we go forward, we do want to be efficient with our interpreter services to have the blocks of times, because that's how we're charged, is by the hour or hours. And if we're going to have 2 different languages or whatever, it might be none, it might be 4, we don't know. We want to make sure that we group them in blocks of time so that once that language, the need for that language is done, then that interpreter is released for the day. And then also, I just wanted to confirm, Alvaro, and I apologize if I didn't ask this question when we were going through the budget, but I noticed on here and in the budget, there are line items, obviously, for videographer, but then we also have a line item in the budget for a videographer contract that we just recently received responses from. So I'm wondering, I guess, what dollar. I just want to make sure we're not double estimating in terms of we have the contract total in one area, and then we're also taking money from that same contract and using it in our public input meetings. And that probably sounded really confusing because it only makes sense to me right now. But I just want to make sure it's not double counted.
It is not double counted. It's
Okay,
an
thank you.
encumbrance, and then we reduce it as it gets used.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Right, and don't we have a pot for videography for business meetings, and then this other pot for these meetings? Yeah. Okay.
Was
Any
that
other-
a question? I'm sorry, Neil.
No.
Okay.
It was a comment.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions, thoughts? Just again, informational. Jane.
This is just a thought, and I actually, I immediately start doodling as I think. Just looking at the cost estimate just for developing the budget, you look and there's 46 meetings here, and these are actually in public input meetings. And so immediately, like, if you look back then at the number of meetings for the line drawer, we're in our, we're just under our 50. We've moved beyond the base into some of those optional ones. And then you essentially there's pre-census, post-census. Now, if you total it up, the pre-census meetings are 33, post-census are 13.
Jane,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we're up against a break. I went over.
Oh, that's right.
Let me answer your question real quick. This does not include the line drawing sessions.
Oh, no.
Okay, let's
No, I
take that up
understand
after.
Yeah, I was just talking about, I was talking about
Right.
the input.
Okay, let's take this question up after break. So it's 3:32, so 47,
Just talking.
3:47, is that right? Am I doing my math right? All right, we'll see you all in 15 minutes. Thanks. Thank you, and welcome back, California. This is the April 1st meeting of the Public Input Design Committee meeting. And at this point, we were in the midst of our budget conversation. Commissioner Anderson was making a comment when I cut her off, so I will let her continue.
No, mine, we don't have, mine will just make sure. It was just more of an observation. Looking at the 46 meetings we have here. Now, these are input meetings. And then looking back at the meetings included in the line drawer contract, again, just looking at public input meetings, not the commission meetings. It's 40 plus 10 for a total of 50. And these are, 46 meetings we're talking about, and there are 50 meetings. So, it looks pretty good. Unfortunately, you can't go like, okay, you have 33 census, pre-census, and 13 posts. So how does it look? You can't, because here it's 30 pre-draft, but the draft part goes past the census. So, and the draft 10, so you can't really go, okay, so do we have enough covered? So it's always to be, so how we play with those instantly becomes obvious when we start looking through all that, which I think we'll be doing each all the way along. But we're still in the same ballpark, which is good.
Yeah, and I'll offer that I had a kind of a epiphany, sort of a mini epiphany, if you will, while we were on break, and I shouldn't have presented this data this way. This was not a good way to present this data. What really the takeaway that I wanted to have is, what each piece costs, right? And as we build meetings and we were going to put pieces together, that's what it's going to cost. And so I'll go back and I'll work with Alvaro to kind of get a better little sort of smorgasbord of pieces that we might need to put together, just to give us an idea of what as we're designing meetings, what they may cost. Okay, Commissioner Ahmed had another engagement, so she won't be joining us for the rest of the afternoon. Okay, well, if there aren't any more budget questions or comments, we'll look at the nominal schedule. If I can find it. Okay, where am I? So basically what I've done here is took Ray's Gantt chart, hid everything that we didn't need to look at, and then revised the dates based on an email back and forth between he and I, and just kind of understanding the timeline here. So I want to start off by saying this is, first of all, a draft, and second of all, it is not an officially approved CRC schedule, right? This is just, and this is for the public as well as us. This is just for us to, this subcommittee, to begin to have a conversation and begin to think. It's not the final schedule in any sense. And if the assumption here is that we get the data on August 15th. Well, mid-August is sort of the time frame, so I picked August 15th randomly.
Neil, you're doing your afternoon wobble again. Your internet's going slow.
Okay, am I back?
You're back now.
Okay, sorry. Well, it wasn't nothing important that I said when you couldn't hear me. Let's see. So the assumption is that the data comes in the 15th, and that around December 31st, we're due. But let's start at the beginning. All right. Let's start at where we are. So we're about the beginning of April. If the data does come in on the middle of August, there's still 6 weeks after the data comes in before we get it, before it's released. Right? So, I mean, really, that's the end of September. So for our public input, portion of our work, we have, May, June, July, August, September-ish to consider using. I imagine as we get closer into September, we're going to be very busy with preparing for census work. But, we do have some time to spread it out. We don't have to do kind of the marathon road trip that the last commission did, obviously, to if we end up doing road trips. As Director Hernandez said earlier, COVID is a moving target. There's an expectation, as I understand it, that within the next few months, the vaccine will be made available to everyone who wants it. But, we don't know how that winds up, with the COVID protocols. So I just, the thought here is, we have several months to do these public input meetings. I mean, we want to get going. We'll definitely start with some virtual public input meetings. There may be opportunities down the road, or virtual and or hybrid, I'll say, potentially. But there may be down the road time for all of us to get together to have public input. Then, October comes around and we drop down into the yellow section, which is the map drawing section. Now, we haven't, as a commission, discussed this in detail. This is Commissioner Kennedy's kind of timeline that he's put together, and I just adopted it directly. And this is a conversation for the entire commission. But the way he's got it laid out is, basically a month and a half to develop the first draft maps, and put the first set of draft maps out middle of November kind of time frame, which would give us 14 days, which would include the holidays, the November holiday in there too. He also, though, is considering drafting the report during those 14 days, drafting the initial report during those 14 days. And then an opportunity for a revised draft map, and then to finalize the draft maps. Now we need to work all this in detail. It's very notional at this point. And I just wanted to get us kind of thinking. I mean, we're really working to start with, right, in this zone here, figuring out our public input meetings, but it's not too long before we really have to get these nailed down and begin to think about this. But there are a number of other subcommittees that are going to be involved in those discussions too. I mean, specifically VRA subcommittee, what does that look like, and how are we going to do that part of it, and how does it all fit together? But it's kind of where we're at this point. Jane?
Just for general purposes, I'm not going to go into the particular individuals like, well, that doesn't work, this blah blah blah. No, I'm not going to do that. To get the line drawing process working very, very smoothly, there have been multiple ideas of what can we do ahead of time, before we get the actual, as you say, are usable. I was using the term as there's legacy data release, then there's CRC usable data, which I see as the September 30th, from the 6 weeks. Basically now it's 6 weeks in there. But before that, the idea of having our, and a lot of this involves the VRA, and I wish, we'd had Russell here, who's been working with this, but kind of the idea is how we might approach the whole idea, which helps in terms of scheduling where meetings are, and going back to them. but it also involves the process of doing that multiple training at the same time, because as you're drawing districts, you have to do the VRA analysis. It isn't you draw and then analyze. It's a synergistic process. It has to happen essentially at the same time, because remember, it's criteria too. And so, but we can rough out things ahead of time. And as much of that as we can rough out, we will in all the different areas. So it's sort of an overlap. But so the idea is ones that we can move up, trying to do a bit more of an idea of what areas we really are in looking at VRA really closely, and probably do that first. But look at those, and the other is, oh shoot, there were two. The idea of moving it all ahead. Well, and actually having our, trial runs. So we actually have all the things working together, how exactly all these meetings will go, and the different types of meetings. So all that, I think we should be trying, maybe even during this legacy data release phase, because we can do some of that roughly and try that with the legacy data, knowing, because that way it's not real, but we can rearrange and go, oh, okay, so we could have input like that. We could modify these things, because we also have to have an idea of evaluating, they're talking about, well, how are we going to evaluate things? How is the data management going to be looking at information? All of these things shift up ahead in our COI inputs, in our input phase as well. So I don't want us to completely, while we have to totally turn our attention to getting input, we also have to have these other processes ongoing, so we can hit the, and here we have it as October 1st, hit that running. So it's it certainly is it helps to have these things and have little dates on them, even though the actual lines may or may not work in that order. But thank you for putting all this together and pulling it out.
Oh, sure. And so I just want to make sure we've captured a couple of things that you said. So first I'll go, there is in here that I hid is conducting the racially polarized voting analysis prior to us getting the final census data. So that work will begin too. I just didn't show it because I mean, while it intersects with what we're doing here, I don't think that they're both dependent. But I think you made a point that I want to make sure we capture. And so I think you were suggesting that we focus on scheduling input from areas where we think there will be VRA requirements early in the process. So we have that input as we're doing the RPV and preparing to do the VRA districts. Is that okay?
Yes, that's exactly it. Certain areas that, one item that the Longborough sort of brought up today, and it's an idea that Commissioner Sadwani and I have been talking about, is in terms of looking at the line drawing and putting meetings together, and how, because it dovetails with the VRA, is how you look at it all, and doing those areas of the states first, getting that input, and then looking at those areas first are the harder ones to do. So then it's kind of easier to manipulate the other districts around that. And it'll make a lot of sense. And the idea of, when you're talking about like not simultaneous meetings, but like consecutive meetings, but in different locations, you can be looking at areas like, say, in Southern California, but also through the Central Valley and through Sacramento Central Valley part. You can be looking at those areas similarly. So things can be, we're collecting information, like we could have staff line drawing and input in a couple of different areas where the commission sees it. We deal with one area of the state from 9 to noon, and then we switch to the next area from 1 to 4, all within the same day. So in terms of getting, these were ideas that were brought up trying to be able to move things along all at the same time, rather than doing strictly one part, we all concentrate on one area. We should be collecting input through the state.
Okay, so it's more of the, what we're going to do, or how we're going to do it kind of thing. So we're going to talk about that in more detail at our next meeting. But I want to make sure I captured your thought about, ensuring that we're getting public input from where that's your question. Do we need to, I will phrase it as a question. Do we need to focus on collecting public input from areas that we expect to have VRA requirements ahead of time? Or first, or whatever.
Yeah, well, we'd like to get as much COI information. If ideally, we'd like to have all of it before the census gets here, census data gets here.
Well,
but yes, those are areas I would recommend. Oh, I'm sorry. Those areas I would recommend that we get to first, just because they're going to require more work. And we don't really know where those are until we do this first racially polarized voting. And what I did not realize is you have to do the data analysis as you're drawing the maps. So, here it's kind of like, well, you do one and then you do the other. You have to kind of basically do them at the same time. So it takes more time to do.
So Jane, I'll offer that you're way ahead of the rest of us on your understanding and thinking about the line drawing process. And so you're gonna work with the line drawer to help with our training session coming up on the 17th. So I would ask you to ensure that we're having all the conversations and learnings that we all need to have to kind of understand the things that you're talking about, because I don't think we're all quite there yet.
And they're much better at explaining the ideas such that they can put it, and so we make decisions. Because that's how we want it. That's why they were so good today. They brought all this information up. The ideas of now these are choices, these are choices, these are choices. And so that's the whole idea of the training, is to make some of these choices, how they fit together, a little more real in our minds, so we can have an inkling of how to make those decisions then.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else? Okay. All right. Patricia, is there anything else we need to think about at this point?
No, I just wanted, last time we got in a lot of conversations about the community-led mapping and districting process and unity mapping. And Neil and I did spend some time with a few of the community members kind of better understanding it. And we originally were going to have them come in and have a conversation with all of us on April 6th, but we'll be moving it to April 14th. Because I think it was an interesting conversation, because as much as I felt like I was following what they were doing, what I really got out of this is in many ways we have parallel processes that intersect at different times. And so yes, they are collecting community of interest maps, but they're also working with the groups on districting and getting us thinking through what would a district look like for them. And then they're also looking at how do you put all those pieces together for a whole state map. So that's why the sharing of data both ways is very critical. And there is no right or wrong way. It's just two parallel processes that are influencing each other.
Trina?
Yes, thank you. I'm wondering, how are you defining the difference in community map versus unity map? Because I'm typically thinking of them as interchangeable terms, but in your sharing just then, it sounded like there was a distinct difference.
There's kind of three. So the community maps is what we've been calling the community of interest, the COI tool, those tools, and that's a community mapping. Districting is actually looking at the communities of interest and putting them on top of the census data and actually drawing lines for the districting. And the unity map is taking those districts and kind of putting it together all for one state map, was how I understood it. But because there's a lot of, the unity map might be just a Los Angeles unity map, or it might be a state of California unity map. But the unity map, the idea is that, the Latino community, the LGBTQ plus community, the Black community, the Asian community, all different communities are working with their communities to identify, and then making sure they're having conversations with each other. So one community doesn't respects the boundaries and such that another community may want, and so they can really create a more a unity map. So it's a little more complex than we originally thought, and they're doing a lot of really good work. But I think it's important for us to understand each other's process. They're further along in their design because and just to do exactly what you said, Trina. Just ask the questions and really understand, so we're using the same terminologies.
Yeah, and I think would be along those lines, it would be good to continue to ask each group, how are they defining what they're presenting? Because I think it may vary just a little bit. I certainly can follow what you've just said, as was, defined from the groups that you've spoken with, but I've heard them referred to in different ways as well. So I think just communication and asking the questions will make sure that we're receiving what was intended.
Okay. Yeah, Jane?
I totally agree with that in terms of the definitions of words. We're not all using the same ones. And certain of them in redistricting terms and VRA terms actually have significant meaning that I'm not familiar with. So it's really important to get the terms of that. But Commissioner Sinai, I have a question. Were they talking about, in the unity maps, were they talking about them strictly as their communities of interest, or were they talking about this as in pre-census or post-census, or was it just, could you?
They have kind of a three-phase process, just like we do, from what I was gathering, and that's why when I point blank said, so when we talk about you coming and presenting to us for 4 days, does that mean you want to present to us before we even start line drawing? They're like, well, that would be an ideal world, but it's not going to work that way because we all get the census data at the same time. So when they're talking about unity mapping, it's the bigger picture than, so they're doing communities of interest, and then they're also looking at the districting, and then they're also looking at the whole state of California for all four maps. Let me add that piece too.
With VRA considerations included in their mapping.
And racial polarizing, and others, because LGBTQ is looking at.
Okay. Let's see. Anything else on this? So as Patricia said, if you look at the little talking points document we put together, we'll just move the items from the April 6th agenda to the April 14th agenda. We'll include, I'm sorry, Marcy.
I just had a quick question. The document you had up right before, what were the numbers at the top underneath the months? I don't know if you went over that.
They're kind of the weeks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, each column roughly is a week.
Okay.
roughly.
Okay. Thank
There are
you.
only four columns in every month, and September has 5 columns. So yeah.
Okay.
So it's just, if you look, April, it's got the months across across the top. Yeah. And then did you have any other thoughts, questions, Marcy, Patti, Cecilia, Freddie? No, we're good. Okay. Well, we're all supposed to be, yeah. We're all in this team. So we want to hear from you, your thoughts too. So please, thanks.
Public comment.
What? You've muted.
Public comment.
Yeah. No, before we get off the agenda, I just wanted to give, if you have other thoughts or ideas, get a hold of us and we'll get those together. We're trying to be a little bit more effective in actually putting real agendas together, and we did for the 14th. We'll revise it based on the cancellation of the 6th, and then we're gonna, as I mentioned earlier, we may try to steal the 20th if we don't need it for a business meeting. We may try to steal the 20th, and I think what we'll do is if we're not going to have a business meeting on the 20th, either way we'll put an agenda together for the 20th. If we're not going to have a business meeting, we'll have that agenda in place. If we decide we don't need to meet on the 20th after the meeting on the 14th, then we won't do it. But we want to make sure that we have another meeting in place. We're going to have kind of a jam-packed meeting on the 14th, and I'm sure we'll have more thoughts to continue to develop our ideas of designing these public meetings, public input meetings. Linda.
Is the intent to have these meetings before each of the meetings that we have, and it would be really helpful if we could start. If we have the dates for our business meetings set, could we set the meetings for this committee meeting as well too? I think it would be really helpful.
We actually have the meeting set for a while. Alicia set up the meetings for the subcommittee meet for all the different super committees. And they go pretty far out. On most times, if it's a full day, Alicia was good at not adding it because it's just too long of a day. But I don't know if they're all on the website already, but we do have them all scheduled.
So we have April 28th from 4 to 8, April 12th from 4 to 8,
May 12th.
May 12th, sorry, yes, and May 26th from 4 to 8. Jane?
Are those, excuse me, those meetings, are those on our proposed, like our agenda document?
They're on the website. If you click on the meetings tab.
Okay, but yeah, no, because the dates of when
they're on the agenda, yeah.
Right, on the agenda one. So they have the one, the date of when the agenda has to be posted as well.
You mean on the agenda document where we're tracking our agenda items?
Yes.
I do not know.
Okay.
Yeah, they are on there, like underneath the other one. It makes it really hard to find them. And that when the agenda is due is very complex because it should be moved one in, because I'm always looking for when is the meeting date, and I'm getting all confused. But yeah, so that's why it'd be better if those two columns were switched. But yes, it is on there.
Put it just on that. That's a good idea. Good, excellent. So on those, because that's such a handy document, it should just be for the agenda. Whatever the date of this meeting is, go, 2 weeks and a day before. That's when the agenda's due. So if you just go, that's the quickest way to figure that out. But okay, great. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Freddie?
Freddie.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that we actually started posting the agenda separately from the CRC business meetings because that was starting to get a little crazy too.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes. So again, for the 14th, we have our own agenda that we will update. And Freddie, are we gonna? I really it might be better too. So on the 14th, yeah, we have our own little section there. Good. Okay. Because then the attachments will be separate than from the attachments for the business meeting, and that makes it a little easier to track them down. Okay, very good. Thank you for that. Okay.
Can I ask one last question, Neil?
Yeah. No,
I just want to see if did we each get? I just want to see what aha moments we got today, because a lot of what we've seen today, we've seen it before in different ways, but we try to pull it and bring it all together so that we could see the legal, the budget, and the contracts and the timelines. Was there any aha moments at any point for anybody today? Well, we didn't have to have this meeting.
Well, I mean, we hope it helped. It certainly helped me to get all this together into one place and review it again. We hope that helped you all.
No, I definitely think it helped, and I appreciate both of you, Commissioner Swarnachari and Sanai, for pulling the meeting together. And I think the more times we go through it and think about it, it not only helps to solidify what we have, it continues to have us think about more and broader. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Jane?
Yeah, it always helps me looking at the timelines and because I see how things fit together. And how we've been talking about the names of things is something I always come back to. And the pre-post census, which we were kind of using, but then there's the draft as well, and how those are staggered have helped me a lot, just in terms of putting it all, so when are we talking, how can we talk about apples and apples when we've been talking about apples and grapefruits and, pears and baseballs. And so I think all these have helped. And yeah, I really do appreciate that you grab these from multiple sources and put them all together. Thank you.
Yeah. Welcome. Okay, so at this point, I'm gonna two things. First of all, I have an announcement that the Director of Outreach position is posted on our website. So for those interested, if you go to wedrawthelines.ca.org, click on About Us, and under the About Us tab is Jobs/Contracting. You will find the posting for the Outreach Director of Outreach and the Chief Counsel. So anyone interested, or you got friends who are interested, let them know. So with that, we're going to take public input. But I want to be really super clear on this. We're taking public input on the topic of the public input design meeting only. We can only take public input related to redistricting in a appropriately noticed meeting of the entire commission. So for this particular meeting, it's a subcommittee meeting. We're focused on public input design process in our input. So Katie, with that.
Yes, Chair. I think we'll write different instructions for these meetings.
And I think that's a good lesson learned. Thank you.
Yeah, I can adjust the line. Okay, so in order to maximize transparency and public participation in our process, the Public Input Meeting Design Subcommittee will be taking public comment in regards to the design of the public input meetings only at this time. To call in, dial the telephone number provided on the live stream feed. It is 877-853-5247. When prompted to enter the meeting ID number provided on the live stream feed, it is 9920-6048-336 for this meeting. When prompted to enter a participant ID, simply press the pound key. Once you have dialed in, you will be placed in a queue. To indicate you wish to comment, please press star 9. This will raise your hand for the moderator. When it is your turn to speak, you will hear a message that says the host would like you to talk and to press star 6 to speak. If you would like to give your name, please state and spell it for the record. You are not required to provide your name to give public comment. Please make sure you mute your computer or live stream audio to prevent any feedback or distortion during your call. Once you are waiting in the queue, be alert for when it is your turn to speak, and again, please turn down the live stream volume. And again, the Public Input Meetings Design Subcommittee is taking public input on the design of the public input meetings. And we do have someone in the queue with their hand raised. And the floor is yours.
Hello, this is Renee Westalusk. I have 3 questions from your total discussion this afternoon. One is, are you planning on conducting more than one public input meeting at a time and on a regular basis during the 33 to 40 public input meetings you will be hopefully hosting? If so, how many commissioners will you have at each public input meeting? That's my first question. And then the second one was kind of from last public input design meeting, where you talked about, a question came up about, should you give more weight to community-based organizations versus individuals? Were you referring to public input at public input meetings when you were making that comparison? And the third one is, are you prohibited from drawing any maps prior to receiving the census data? Is there any way you can do some preliminary maps just based on public input and the current mapping that's available? Those are my questions.
Okay. So in regards to question 1, are we planning on conducting more than one public input meeting at a time? And if so, how many commissioners will be at each location? Yeah, we don't know yet. That's what we're working on. And at our next meeting on the 14th, we're going to dive much more deeply into the actual design of our public input meetings. And so that's certainly a consideration that we have, but I don't have an answer for you at this point. That'll be an outcome of our next meeting, maybe our next 2 meetings of this subcommittee. Okay, and then, okay, so then the question of, should we give more weight to input of groups or individuals? So that, that came up as a topic of conversation. And what we're trying to do to answer that question, so we don't have an answer to that question yet, is we're trying to understand the process that the groups are going through, and what are the groups trying to present to us. There's a number of groups out there that are doing an awfully lot of work on collecting public input and being prepared to present that in a way, and present that to the commission. And so and draw maps, as you heard. And so that is a question for the entire commission to decide upon. But what we're trying to do, what Patricia and I are trying to do, is is get this subcommittee and a better understanding of that process so that we can go to the full commission and have that conversation and come up with an approach that we think is equitable for all Californians. Can we do preliminary maps? So I believe we can, but I'm going to ask Marion. And so I will, let me preface this by saying, this is not a topic of conversation we've had with the commission. It would be decision of the entire commission, whatever we do. So Marion?
The only legal requirement is that you have to have public input before you draw maps. So there's no prohibition against drawing maps as long as you have public input before you get census data. It's a practical problem that you really can't draw maps until you know. You could draw COI maps that shows where communities' interests are, but you can't put those into districts until you know what the population is.
And it's my understanding that, while there's data out there from the census that comes out, what's called, Jane, the
American Community Survey or the Legacy.
Yeah, right. Yes, that data is just not detailed enough to draw accurate districts. That the census data is the most accurate. And
correct. It's accurate enough to do the VPR, but not to do. You don't get block information.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you have a comment, Jane?
Yeah, just the idea of that trying to draw districts, you have to pick one set of data, and the issue is, the data isn't, as Marion said, your first criteria is actual population, but if you use, say, this legacy, which doesn't have prisoners reallocated, just for a trial, say, you have numbers, and so it's really just to learn the process. But the maps, it's a good idea to do a little tiny bit of that just to work out process. Is it sort of a waste of time because you have to deal? Those numbers aren't the same, so those districts aren't the same. It's really more to do something to get the process going and to possibly look at some difficult areas. Kind of like, well, boy, when we hit this area, it doesn't matter where it is, how you draw a line through these could be tricky. Which is why and the idea is if you do a little bit before the census data gets there, you might be able to then really hit the ground running when the census data gets there. But nothing can be permanent without our reallocated census data.
Thanks, Shane. So I think that's TBD on how we do that down the road to be determined. Sorry. Thanks, Ms. West-Lusk. Are there any other callers?
That was it, Chair.
Okay. Well, with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today, and we will reconvene as a group on the 14th. So with that, I'll adjourn this meeting.